Let's listen to a reading from the book of the prophet Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you will not serve my God or worship the golden statue that I set up? Be ready now to fall down and worship the statue I had made. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, flute, lyre, harp, psaltery, bagpipe, and all other musical instruments. Otherwise you shall be instantly cast into the white hot furnace. And who is the God who can deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered King Nebuchadnezzar, "There is no need for us to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If our God, whom we serve, can save us from the white hot furnace and from your hands, O king, may he save us. But even if he will not, know, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the golden statue that you set up." King Nebuchadnezzar's face became livid with utter rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times more than usual, and had some of the strongest men in his army bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and cast them into the white hot furnace. Nebuchadnezzar rose in haste and asked his nobles, "Did we not cast 3 bound men into the fire?" "Assuredly, O king," they answered. "But," he replied, "I see 4 men unfettered and unhurt walking in the fire, and the 4th looks like a son of God." Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel to deliver the servants who trusted in him." They disobeyed the royal command and yielded their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So we're given this passage from the book of the prophet Daniel during this last week before Holy Week to be an encouragement. A little background on this scene in case you're not familiar. This is the scene of exiles from Israel in the nation of Babylon being persecuted by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. After their defeat, many of the noted citizens of Israel were in fact deported and exiled and became slaves in the nation of Babylon. And as a sign of their obedience to their new king, Nebuchadnezzar had a golden statue fashioned that the exiles were obliged to bow down and worship. This would have touched a nerve to the people of Israel, for they would have remembered the golden calf that they had fashioned after they had been released from slavery in Egypt, and how the Lord commanded them never to worship a false image. So failing to do so, the 3 young men are cast into a white hot furnace, and then we hear in the particular passage that as King Nebuchadnezzar comes to see his persecution, he discovers that in the white hot furnace, together with the 3 young men, a 4th figure, of course the angel of the Lord, is there to protect them and guide them. This particular passage was very inspirational to the first generations of our Christian faith, for they too lived in a time like the exiles in Babylon, and that they would have been very much persecuted for their faith, and so they wanted to hold firm, and so they held up these role models of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to encourage them to remain steadfast in their faith despite the cost, trusting that the Lord would send a messenger to protect them. Let's look at a particular image now from one of the catacombs. I got it over here on my laptop that we can look at. Hopefully you can take a look at this one. And there it is, the 3 young men and the fiery furnace. This is from the catacombs of Priscilla in Rome, and we can see depicted indeed a very white hot fiery furnace, and then in the midst of it the 3 young men, and see all the flames at their feet. They're raising their hands, praising God that they're being protected. This is a time of praise for them. And this image again would be depicted in many times on ancient Christian catacombs, burial places of Christians, where they might have gathered, recognizing the persecution that was happening all around. So this particular passage I think speaks to us as well these days. We know this is the time of abnormal, unusual practice of our faith in our lives. Unlike external persecutors like a Roman authority or Nebuchadnezzar, we have the external circumstances of a pestilence or a epidemic that is causing us to have to change our lives. And just like those early believers in the catacombs, we want to hold up these figures to remind us that our God will guide us through this, and that we do not need to succumb either to, for example, what happened in the book of Daniel when the foreign leader asked them to pledge their obedience, or to change like those early believers and conform their lives to the pagan culture that was all around them. Our Christian faith has a beautiful notion of virtue that is a learned habit. We know this to be true in our lives, that over even a very short time, if we repeat a certain behavior, it can become very much part of us. If I pick up smoking today, which I don't do, I could before very long have a very deeply ingrained habit. We would call it a vice because it's not a good habit. Or on the other side, I can develop a good habit. I could, for example, take up piano lessons today, and before long I could delight people with my new formed good habit, virtue of playing the piano. I think one of the particular temptations during this time that we could develop a bad habit is the very essence of an epidemic where we're fearful about being with other human beings. We can begin to see them not as persons created in God's image, but instead contagions, people that are a threat to our own health. Of course, we need to be prudent, but at the same time, we'll want to fight the habit of habitually beginning to see people as nothing more than carriers of a virus, because we do know they were created in God's image. So let's ask that the Lord will give us the love, the courage, and the zeal that we need to continue the good habit of seeing other persons created in God's image. Lord, might that be so. Help us.